My name's Brittany, and I just wanted to say thank you all for coming this evening to hear President Pearce speak. And please feel free to ask any questions that you'd like, and we just appreciate you coming. So here he is.
There are chairs up here, and there's a wall over here. I see family spies in the crowd. You want to make sure I tell the truth about my heritage. I am grateful. I really want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I know there's lots of things to do, and the schedules are busy with family and all kinds of stuff. I do know it's a little easier today than it used to be. You don't have to miss your favorite programs. You can DVR it. So maybe it's not the sacrifice it used to be, but I know it is. Future voters back here in the back, little tiny guys, thank you. Hey, I just hate to see people stand up. There are some chairs up here, and there's a wall up for the younger guys that have still a strong back. Anyway, come on, I don't want you to stand.
Maybe move them back a little bit.
Anyway, I just want to tell you this is that's not a bad idea either. I want to tell you this is an unusual time, and I really do appreciate you coming out. This recall is different. There's no primary. It's simply an election where everybody gets to vote. The Democrats have endorsed my Republican opponent. It tells you how much that party loves me, I guess. And this recall is brought about by folks who, and I'm not trying to throw rocks, just let me give you facts on this. Randy Perez is a community organizer, a failed U.S. Senate candidate against, Democrat candidate against John McCain. But he's out of Berkeley, California. He was the president, the AFL-CIO president of Arizona. And they're spending lots of money. I guess I should be honored. Trent Franks called me the other night and told me that he had heard they're going to spend about $1 million to remove me. And I thought, my wife will be impressed. I've never been worth $1 million. So I'm very impressed with that. But I can tell you, I've always done what I said I'm going to do. I've kept every promise I've made. Let me just go through a few of the things that I think we've accomplished and be proud of in the state of Arizona. Very proud of. We lead the nation in many, many areas. Some areas that don't get talked about that ought to be a school choice, giving parents the tools to decide what's best for their children. That's our job. Not allowing a bureaucrat to make a decision. You as parents make the decision that's best for your children. And our job is to make sure you have the ability and the tools to do that. I love public education. My sister's a public education teacher in a public school. But I think you still have to have competition and choice, and it's all about parents and children, those kind of things. We're number one in the nation in Second Amendment rights. Number one. And I'm proud to have been the sponsor of most of those bills. Alan Corbin, which has written about 15 different books on Second Amendment and gun rights, wrote a great article on the restoration of your constitutional right when we meet that. And the reason we know we're number one is because the Brady list has us as number 50. So we know we're number one in the nation in freedom. But we've done some other great things. We passed I was just talking to a couple of business guys here a minute ago. We know that we've got to put Arizona back to work. And how you do that is clear. Get government out of the way. And that is lower the taxes, lower the regulatory burden, create an environment conducive to productivity, build private sector jobs, not government jobs. And we've done that. We've now gone from the 49th, when the recession hit and it hit hard, Arizona was 49th in the nation. And this recession really is for a lot of reasons. I won't go all those reasons, but for a lot of reasons. The fact that we're the fastest growing, or the second fastest growing state in the nation for over 2 decades. So construction and other elements were big in the state of Arizona. So when the construction industry took a dive, Arizona went right with it. We are now number one in the nation in job growth. Number one in the nation in job growth. A new study that just came out. We're number 6 in economic recovery when you look the whole package together. So we've done some wonderful things. One of them is, we just put out a jobs package this last session that I worked with the House and the governor on. We've done some other good things, needless to say, but that is lowering the corporate tax, lowering the personal property business tax. We're going to do more. We know we've got a lot more to do, and we know we're not done. But we've done some good things. And then, of course, the thing that I get asked to talk about a lot, not just in Arizona, but across the nation, is this crisis we have of this open border. And it's something you have to talk about. I read legislation in Proposition 200 in 04 simply to stop voting fraud and welfare fraud. Was sued 7 times, been to court 7 times, federal court. Just seems like it never ends from those folks who would have no part of enforcement of any of our laws. And then I wrote Proposition 100, 102, 103, and 300 in 06. You passed by an average of 75%. 75%. Folks, you can't get to 75% until you cross every political and demographic line there is. 60% of Hispanics voted for those, but yet people would have you believe that they're not as solid an American as we are, and I think it's an insult. I'm on the Arizona Republican Latino radio program again this Saturday. Good friends of mine who have started an organization to counter the myths that for somehow Hispanics are not as patriotic as anybody else. In fact, their dues are 1070. And so they, in tribute to SB 1070, show their support and where they're at. So we know where they're at. Yeah, employer sanctions I wrote in 2007. Just won a Supreme Court decision on that. 5-3 decision. A huge decision. Much about states' rights as anything else. Because Arizona's right. In fact, Judge Roberts made a great statement in his majority writing. He wrote for the majority. He said, not only does Arizona have a right, they have an obligation to enforce those laws. And I was grateful for that ruling. And we're on our way to the Supreme Court in SB 1070, a simple bill. And the world would have you believe otherwise. 30 states are writing legislation modeled after SB 1070. 30 states. We're at the front of the parade. There's a national, the nation is proud of us. The governor just got back from a trip. She visited Oklahoma and then on the way to Arkansas. And she gave me a call. And I was very appreciative of the call. She said, Russell, because she knows the tough times, the media takes its cheap shots every day at me. And so she called to kind of give me a little pat on the back. And she said, I know what you're going through. She says, and I feel bad about it. She said, outside of your own district, and probably in your district too, the silent majority, she said, Arizona is a rock star. She says, I get standing ovation after standing ovation after standing ovation everywhere I speak about what Arizona has done. And the fact the nation is proud. We've changed the debate in Washington, D.C. We've changed the national debate. Little old Arizona. Now, nobody expected to do that. We simply were trying to do our job. And these bills are as much about states' rights as they are anything else. Arizona's right to enforce the law. Arizona's right to protect its citizens. Arizona's right to protect jobs for Americans. Arizona's right to protect the taxpayer. And it is as much about that. And that's why I'm grateful for a Supreme Court that I think is a 5-4 decision on states' rights on almost any issue. But these are great times. We're winning the battle. We're winning the battle. And we can't retreat. We're a nation of laws. And as this constitutional republic is made very clear. And our founders, and I love to talk about the founders, and I won't spend too much time talking about them, but I love the founding principles of this republic. I'm a studier of those founders. And I study about the real George Washington, the real Benjamin Franklin, the real Thomas Jefferson, the real Patrick Henry, the firebrand it is often called because of his kind of pounding on the chest and demanding that we stand up and fight, as he did in his speech, and everybody knows about give me liberty, give me death, but very few probably have read that entire impassioned speech. And I know about Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, or Turning Point in the World. Many of you may have not heard about Thomas Prince, some of the miracles that occurred during the making of this wonderful country. Thomas Prince was a minister. Have any of you heard of the Old South Church in Boston? It's a great story. It used to be taught in schools by 1936, and now most of those issues aren't taught anymore, which is kind of sad. Because Thomas Prince was the minister of the Old South Church in Boston. This is before the Revolutionary War, but there would have been no Revolutionary War had it not been for people like Thomas Prince, what occurred in this miracle. In about 1748, the French were coming over with a fleet of over 100 brigands, big gunships. Their mission was to destroy every single city along the coast, which almost was all the population. That's where all of it resided. And the governor of Massachusetts wouldn't happen today, asked for the state of Massachusetts to fast and pray. And they did. And after that couple of days of fasting and praying, then in the Old South Church, Reverend Prince, Thomas Prince, prayed in a prayer that you wouldn't probably hear today. He actually asked the Lord to sink those ships, to kill their enemies, but it was a moral prayer relevant to the defense of this nation that was trying to get started. A storm rose out of nowhere. The clouds darkened the skies. A hurricane came out, destroyed almost every one of those ships. No shot was fired. The few that remained limped back to France. Had that not occurred, there probably would have been a country, because it would have been destroyed before it ever got started on us. Those are the miracles that ought to be told about these great founders of this country. And you can't read about the unkillable George Washington and the miracle after miracle, starting from the ragtag army that took on the most powerful army and navy in the world, made up of congregations led by ministers. I mean, think about the beginning of this wonderful nation. Miracle after miracle. You have to know that God had his hand in the making of America. You have to know that. I believe that with all my heart. As a result, kind of a long story, but a couple of that are worthy stories, to tell you the passion I have for this republic and freedom. I understand, and I know, and it's like Ronald Reagan said, freedom is only a generation away from being lost. Folks, we are in a battle. We're in a battle today with gangster government in D.C. that has no respect for your tax dollars, regulatory schemes. You know, and I'm a firm believer. If America is going to be saved, it'll be saved by the states rising up to take their position. As you know, the states created the federal government, and they gave the federal government certain limited enumerated rights in Articles 1, 2, and 3. All the rest were reserved for the states. They created the federal government, and they intended the federal government to have very limited power. It's the sovereign states that would have the power, and they have it today. If they exercise it, they could control what Washington, D.C. is doing in the rightful manner. The states have the ability to not support those. It's called. There's the Article 5 with the Constitutional Amendment, and then you have the provision that nullification, where you can nullify it and they put it into our Constitution. And it's just like the bills we passed on police powers. States have constitutional police powers. They've never been preempted from enforcing federal law. When you have sanctuary policies among these cities, and that's what 1070 is about, is to remove those illegal sanctuary policies. Under the federal law, 8 U.S.C. 1644 and 1373, it is illegal under federal law to have a policy that restricts or limits law enforcement from enforcing our laws. It's actually illegal. But yet we have them all over the country, almost every major city. And yet Arizona passes a law to enforce those laws, to remove those illegal policies. And what happens? You have a president of the United States, the first time in the history of the United States that a sitting president has sided with foreign governments to sue its own citizens. And I'm not bashful when I tell people it's impeachable. It's a violation of the 10th Amendment. It's a violation of his constitutional duties. They have a primary responsibility on the border. Well, what's it cost that border? It's always been a state's responsibility, along with the feds. They have a responsibility to enforce those laws. The only impediment to enforcing those laws has been political, not a lack of power, not a lack of authority. Had Congress wanted to limit the power of the states on these issues, they could have used what are called their plenary powers. They have that ability to do that under certain circumstances. They've never done that. Never done that. And that's why I'm very confident. Not only do we have an example now of a huge states' rights victory with employer sanctions and the Supreme Court upholding that, the same result will be with 1070 when we get there.
Alabama's been sued by the president now too, as they followed our suit. And so I think the United States Supreme Court will be compelled to take that case of SB 1070.